Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I'm joined by two very special guests with Jim Orr and also soon to arrive Des McLean. They are going to be talking about Bend It Like Bertie. This is the big Acsom's charity weekender. Jim Orr, you've been part of Acsom for some time. This is an opportunity for us to raise some cash for the less privileged amongst us at Christmas time. But we do have a very special guest, Jim, someone that you know so well. And we're going to get him live in from Harry's Bar. So, Des McLean, are you able to join us?
Yes, I'm actually just walking into Harry's Bar right now, in and out the cold of snowy Rob Royston today, and we're now in Harry's Bar.
Fantastic. You want to show us a wee bit about the bar shows around?
Harry's Bar.
Yeah.
Harry's Bar, there we go. There's the man up there, first of all, Messi. Hopefully he'll get his first World Cup medal on Sunday. There's Rocky Balboa. I know that you're a fan of signed memorabilia. My wife took me there for my birthday, believe it or not, Madison Square Gardens, New York. He signed that, and I was very emotional. And I stood there. She took a photo of me and Sly, and he turned around and went, "Down the blood, there you that." And she went, "What did you say?" I said, "I've not got a clue." So basically, it's all here. This is Harry's Bar. This was the big lockdown pub. Honestly, comedy club in your front room with Zoom. It's Harry's Bar, named after my wee boy Harry. It's got Heineken signs. It's got the Rat Pack here. It's got Peaky Blinders IPA. It's got draft there. It's got draft lager. There's a full keg. It's got taxi numbers. It's got Wi-Fi codes. It's even got scampi fries. You can't even
love it.
Scampi fries. Although due to the recession, look at that. That is ridiculous.
Is that Buckfast miniature? Wow.
Well, that's all I can get now, Jim, Paul, with the current recession, thanks to the government. But don't get me started on that. Solidarity. I don't want to get... Anyway, there's a wee poster of me as brothers. Viva Des Vegas. There's, hey, you come into my house, and you embarrass me. But there's everything happening here. This is Harry's Bar. I've had many a crazy night in here. It's got draft lager, neon signs, Wi-Fi, taxi numbers. I've even got an old guy in the back giving out lollipops and hair gel. That's right. He's not paid me since last year, sir. Right. Anyway, so this is Harry's Bar.
Hair gel. Does he do aftershaves and perfumes and all that kind of stuff as well?
He gives out the wee lollipops and the wee deodorant. The wee guys in the pub you get still, and then they demand a £1 coin. Right. So I hope you can see me. Hello to all the viewers. It's Christmas time. Chestnuts roasting on an open fire. Jack Frost, he's nipping at your nose. Yuletide hymns being sung by a choir. And folk dressed up as Eskimos. Everybody knows a turkey and some mistletoe. Right, Jim. I say his name isn't about the day more. Nick Harry on, get straight in with it.
It's great to be on the Des McLean show. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, this is tremendous.
Listen, you're always welcome, both of these.
Love that. Absolutely love that.
This is the carry on, low power mode, just to let everybody know. Apparently, I was the master of Zoom during lockdown. I was nominated for the guy who kept everybody entertained. Now my iPhone is telling me that I've got 20% power left.
Plenty.
Master of Zoom.
Plenty.
They called me the Lionel Messi of Zoom during lockdown. I was that good that I couldn't even get through on I didn't even have it set up on my laptop, but we'll get there. Let's do this, guys. Let's do this.
We'll get there, Des, and if anybody phones you in the meantime, we'll get through that as well. You are doing it on your iPhone, so there won't be an issue. Jim, we have spoken quite a few times about your theatrical endeavours, and your latest one that is coming up in the new year is Bend It Like Bertie. Before we get cracking on with the show, tell us a wee bit more about this. There's going to be a link obviously underneath the video. When can we go and see the show?
Bend It Like Bertie, the Pavilion Theatre, February 9th to 11th. So that's only about 9-10 weeks away. So starring Des McLean, who you might have just seen there, as the legendary BERTIE AULD. We toured it last year, did really well, so we're back for more in February. So that's us.
I'm looking forward to that. And we did do...
Yeah.
Sorry,
I was going to say that you had For the charity weekender, you had asked me, give me a Celtic topic, and so the obvious choice is going to be BERTIE AULD, obviously.
Yes.
So if Mr. McLean can make it, because he's a busy man, let's for an hour or so chat about the Bold BERTIE. And what I've been doing for those who follow me on Twitter, both of them, I've been putting on an advent calendar every day, sort of kind of BERTIE AULD photograph, and I thought about the 12 days of BERTIE. So I've picked 12 photographs from the advent calendar, and I thought we could spend 4 or 5 minutes talking about the photographs and what's behind it and any wee stories that are therein. So that's the kind of plan for the next hour or so.
I like the concept, Jim. I really do. When we bring the pictures up, it will inevitably hide our faces. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but we will go in because there's nothing quite like bringing up a visual to spark the imagination. And day number 1, the BERTIE Advent Calendar. We've got this image here. I'm going to come to you first. Des, how much do you love the old jerseys? Look at the guys, Jimmy McGrory in his suit. You and I spoke about that, how well dressed these guys were back in the day.
Well, it's funny you should mention about how impeccably, well dressed these guys were, and that there's something. Look at the how romantic that lineup is. The old Celtic Football Club, iconic. The football strip, incredible. But that was a young BERTIE, not so old there. And BERTIE was playing with a different generation of greats. I remember like my dad, even before my dad's time, he was telling me about Willie Fernie and Bertie Peacock and Charlie Tully. But BERTIE would call him Charles Patrick Tully. Bertie's attention to detail was the main thing. And Billy Connolly said that BERTIE AULD would have been a brilliant professional stand-up comedian. There's no doubt. His storytelling, he was Gallus, he was funny, his timing, he would have been brilliant. So it was Bertie's attention to detail. And when he would talk about Charles Patrick Tully, not just Charlie Tully, as everyone else knows and loves him, he would talk about Charlie had a soft hat, he got it out of his Slaters, and he would always, off with the hat. You wouldn't have seen this hat. It was absolutely minted by me, magnificent, soft hat he had. So BERTIE would always pick out these wee things about what they were wearing. The detail was amazing. So yes, those were the days. I mean, that is a lineup, and it's a very iconic photograph. Beautiful.
It is a tremendous lineup. I mean, I can spot Neely Mockin in the front row, of course, alongside Charlie Tully, Bertie Peacock, Willie Fernie, and we've got Billy McPhail, Bobby Collins. What a team! I think that's maybe John Higgins.
Of course, for Neely Mockin.
Yeah. In the final, the 7-1 game. Now, what's interesting for me as well, Jim, maybe you have or haven't noticed this. Look what Bertie's doing. He's got his hands on the shoulders of the player in front of him. And he's the youngster, almost as if he's the old guy, the old veteran, with his hands on the player's shoulder in front of you. What does this picture say to you, Jim?
I think one of the things that's interesting is the goalkeeper. Most of that team were in the 7-1 team of 57, so BERTIE didn't play that day. The goalkeeper in that picture didn't. So there's a wee question for anyone who's on the online chat. Who was the goalkeeper in the 7-1 game? Because it's quite a kind of sad story behind that particular goalkeeper that played in the game, because he went to jail later in his career for match fixing. So he's known the picture. So there you go. There's a wee question. No, it's obviously that's a black and white picture that's been done up because the colours are too vivid for that. Jimmy McGrory suit's bizarre. I think it's a bizarre colour brown. Also, I think apart from the guy in the left in the front row, I think the other 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys are pretty well known. So again, online chat people tuning in. Who are those in the first row from the second and the left onwards? See if you can name who those people are. So
it's interesting. It always has been interesting to me that obviously we think about the European Cup winning team and we can recite it almost like the alphabet, Jim. Yep. But the 1957 team that beat Rangers 7-1, we should be able to go through the team now. Yep. The only reason I know most of them, and I probably couldn't give you the Simpson-Craig game all the way through, is because I studied that game for Neely Mockin. But I know the goalkeeper you're referring to. I'm not quite sure who the goalie is in the picture. That's something I'd need to check. But
it's a question for the online chat, guys.
That is a staggering bit of Celtic trivia straight off the bat, isn't it, with Jim Orr? Brilliant.
I know, it's superb. It's a wealth, but you look at some of the faces there, Sean Fallon, Bobby Evans, what a side. And then, obviously, the other two guys wearing the kind of doctor's coats, Des, they look a little bit sinister, to be honest.
They look as though they're there for some experiment to see
Aye.
what's going to happen to these players.
Harold Shipman.
Genuinely look as if in 1957 we took out these players and watch what happens in the next 90 minutes. 4 of them. So one of them went to jail for match fixing. That's interesting.
When Harold Shipman was the Celtic doctor.
That is incredible. But of course, that jersey as well. I've studied the Celtic jersey. I love it, the iconic hoops. And they wore that jersey for years and years, and it was replaced. That particular kind of rugby-style jersey was replaced with a round neck one, which we remember from the 1960s era and Lisbon, etc. Because, I mean, Celtic were wearing jerseys, Jim, for 10 years plus back then. There was no kind of commercial value in clubs releasing replica shirts. But even back then, it's the glorious green and white hoops. And they were Umbro jerseys as well. And
the Celtic jersey by Paul John Dykes, available in all good bookshops. Thank you.
I know.
Timing.
That was a blatant open goal for a plug there. I was surprised.
It was. It was. I'll tell you what.
Have you bought that book yet, Des? Have you bought the Celtic jersey by Paul John Dykes, available in all good bookshops? Have you bought it yet?
It's a perfect stocking filler for many Celtic fans.
Perfect stocking
I love
filler.
that.
It's an easy digest book where you look through the glorious colours of Celtic Football Club's history. Amazing.
In fact, sold out to Amazon, but if you go to the penalty spot tomorrow, Danny McLean will send you your copy.
Tim,
I'll be there.
He's got all weekend
Oh,
to plug
sorry.
that. Give him a juicy
Exactly.
See you tomorrow there, Des. See you tomorrow, 11 o'clock, penalty spot. On you go.
What I love about this, before we move on to the next picture, is those socks that Neely Mockin is wearing, right? They're in the book. His son kept the socks, the actual socks that he's wearing there. And obviously they wore them for years as well. Anything else you'd like to add to that picture, Jim? It's a cracking one to get us started.
What book? Sorry, Paul, that socks in the book.
By the way, can I just say, we are never... See, when we get to the hour mark, I bet you were the second photograph.
It's likely. Let's jump onto the second one then, because I think there is a risk that we're just going to stick with that. Now, the big one here is, you guys might be able to tell me. I don't know who the player is on the left. I can name the other three, I think, but I don't know who the guy is on the left, which will be to the right of Bertie Auld. Ian St John, Dennis Law. Is that right, Jim?
Correct, yeah.
Who's the guy on the left?
Don't know. There's also when Scotland drew England 2 each in 1965. They were 2 down at half time and they came back and drew 2 each. And the English commentator, St John scored the goals, and the English commentator called him St John. And St John equalises for Scotland. So anyway, I don't know the guy on the left. I don't know who he is. Des? No.
That's another absolute cracker of a
online chat, guys. On you go. Who is that?
But no, it's funny because there's 3 players there. Obviously, Dennis Law's just. Well, you know, he had me out of the photograph. You know, what a player. You can just see St John saying, you know, oh, Bertie, you cracked me up, Bertie. You're some laugh, Bertie. There's 3 players there that we can see, but there was only 3 caps, international caps for Bertie as well. That was a shocker, eh? A Lisbon line with a great, you know, scored goals, you know, tough guy. You know, every team would dream of a midfielder like that, but he could only get 3 caps for Scotland. And apparently, as me and Jim found out, it was because of his disciplinary record. So he only played 3 games for Scotland. So how can they say that?
The photographs from 1959. He only got his 3 caps in 1959. I mean, he was first Scottish player to be sent off on his debut for retaliation. So Bertie, that is it. So, just in terms of, there's always the kind of age-old debate about the Lisbon Lions and the fact that they get so few caps. I mean, Bertie never got a cap after 1959.
That's astonishing.
In the late 60s, because
it is astonishing.
Because Jim Baxter, obviously Jim Baxter was some player, but Jim Baxter's last game was in late 1967, and Bertie was in his pomp then, and Baxter and Bertie were around at the same age, but Bertie was playing really well there, and Bobby Murdoch never get many caps. Imagine Auld and Murdoch in the Scotland midfield.
Oh, Jim, I mean, you're talking about Sorry, Des. I'm saying you're talking about a player that played in 3 European finals, and he got 1 international cap for each of the European finals that he played in, Des.
It's staggering. And you talk about tributes, right, to and how good a player Bertie Auld. There was a brilliant interview with Pat Crerand, and they went, "Do you regret leaving Celtic?" and all that. He says, "I'd have never got into that midfield. He says Auld and Murdoch right away. So, they all knew he was a quality midfielder. A solid hard man who scored goals. I mean, we were talking about that the other time we met up, the amount of goals that Bertie scored and all that. But yeah, he never got a look in after 59. Incredible.
Another quiz question for the online chat. Pat Crellon's middle name. Go for it.
Without checking.
I'm in a kind of quizzical mood today. On you go.
Yeah,
I like that.
very much so.
One final observation. You're looking at Bertie there. There isn't an ounce of fat on him. Look at the waist. Look at the waist on him, right? But also, and again, I've got to mention this, that tremendous brill-creamed hair that he's got. It's superb. It's superb. Not a hair out of place.
Absolutely, yeah.
Nah, that's tremendous. And those jerseys as well, the big, massive Scotland crests on them. I love all that kind of stuff. And we are going to move on to the next picture. And you know this, I'm going to skip one and come back because number 3, there it is, number 3. And I was talking about 3 European finals earlier, Jim. Some Celtic fans might think, that's not right. We only got into 2. But of course, I was talking about when he moved down south, wasn't I?
He moved to Birmingham in 1961 for 15 grand. He fell out with Bob Kelly. Bob Kelly didn't like players that answered him back. And surprise, surprise, Bertie was one of these guys who liked to answer people back. Played in the Fairs Cup final not long after he joined Birmingham, and they lost to Roma, I think it was. And he also won the League Cup a couple of years later. Birmingham beat Villa. Local derby in the League Cup final. But yeah, he played in the First Cities Cup final in 1961. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I would need to check this, but in terms of Scottish players playing in European finals, Des, to get 3, he must be right up there. I know that Dalglish played in a few. Obviously, we had 2 European finals in Nottingham Forest with John Robertson, but Bertie played in 3 different European finals.
And yet, 3 caps for Scotland. That's what we're talking about. You can't that. If you didn't know, if somebody says who was the guy who played in 3 European Cup finals but only get 3 caps, you wouldn't believe that as a question. You just wouldn't believe that. You'd be thinking, what? John
McGovern won 2 European Cups with Forest and never played for Scotland.
No caps.
Sorry, on you go. No caps.
But
he got no caps.
Believe
wow.
it or not,
No.
Ali McLeod didn't know John McGovern was Scottish. By the way, that's another staggering fact. McLeod got asked about it and he thought he was English. That shows you how good McLeod was at the time.
That's incredible.
Now, we could talk all day.
He leaves Celtic.
Isn't it funny that Bertie is... Paul, you always said that Bertie looked like a real gangster on some of these floaties. He did look like your typical Glasgow gangster, feared gangster. But isn't it funny that he went to Birmingham, the home of the Peaky Blinders?
Absolutely.
We're going to see a man, Mr. Auld, Mr. Bertie Auld. Oh, please sit off, Tommy. No, he won't. He's a hard man. He's the only man to get 3 caps for Scotland because they feared his disciplinary record.
Anyway, carry on.
Oh, I love it. Now, the big turning point in the 1960s, of course, Jim, came in 1965 in the Scottish Cup final. And for people to understand just how big a result this was, they need to understand how great a side Dunfermline had. Largely due to the fact that Jockstein had gone there from Celtic because he had been coaching Celtic reserves, and everybody that were coached by him were sad to see him go, and that included some of the Lisbon Lions. John Clark, Tommy Gemmell, Billy McNeil. They all played for Billy in the reserve team. He leaves for Dunfermline, and he builds a phenomenal Dunfermline side, who are still very, very strong by the time Steam goes to Hibs and then back to Celtic. And this is the game that changes everything, isn't it? 1965 Scottish Cup final.
I think we could easily talk about that picture for another 2 or 3 hours. The game that's featured in Benelli Bertie, the pavilion this February. It's funny, there's a line in the play which wasn't meant to be funny, but people laugh at it. And it's right before the cup final. And one of the characters turns around to his son and says, what chance have we got against a really good team like Dunfermline? And that gets a big laugh.
It wasn't
meant to be funny because Dunfermline were going for the league that season. Dunfermline, Kilmarnock and Hearts were nip and tuck at the top of the league. They were beating major teams in Europe. They were a big team, and that was down to Jockstein. And everyone laughs at that. You're thinking, We laughing at. They were big, and people can't get their heads around about how awful Celtic were, how dreadful Celtic were. They hadn't won anything for 12 years. People look at the early 90s and think that was worse. It was much worse. And the thing about the 60s, which is different from the 90s, is that in the 90s, Celtic fans can look back and say, well, we once won the European Cup, we're once really good, this is bad. Whereas in the 60s, Celtic were nothing. In the world stage, they was big as Hibs or, Hearts or anything like that. But yeah, that's the game that changed everything. That's the launch pad for the Lisbon Lions. And in Bertie's book, Bertie says that was his favourite game. And that's the thing that I've made the point of before, that people talk about the 65 Cup final and it was Jockstein coming. But it wasn't, it was Bertie Auld. Because Bertie Auld came in early January and then they went on a cup run and they beat St Mirren at Love Street. And the headlines in the paper are all this and all that. They go to Queen's Park, Hampden beat them 1-0. Again, Bertie's a star man, beat Kilmarnock 3-2 at Celtic Park. Bertie's a star man and scores a goal. Jockstein came then and they played Motherwell at Hampden, drew 2 each. Bertie scored again. Lucky to get through that game, win the replay 3-0. So Hampden Park, it's a cup final. And Celtic have been playing really poorly. I mean, Jockstein came there. And people who don't know the story think that, well, Jockstein, everything, he touched on to gold. But they were poor. They were 8th in the league before the cup final. They had lost 6-2 to Falkirk 10 days before. At Falkirk, with a crowd of 4,000 people. They'd lost 2-1 to Partick Thistle at Parkhead the week before with a crowd of 10,000. He dropped Jimmy Johnson for the final. Mm-hmm. Now, he's lucky there's no social media back then.
Can you imagine?
He dropped Jimmy Johnson for the final. Are you mad? So, into the final, and Dunfermline were slight favourites for the final because of all everything I said there, and a lot of that's down to Jockstein. So Dunfermline scored, Bertie equalises, Dunfermline scored, so that's the first goal, Bertie's first goal, equalising. They score again, Bertie equalises again, and then Billy McNeil scores. And it was kind of the Bertie Auld final, and it was really the Bertie Auld Cup run. And if you look upon that as the launch pad for the Lisbon Lions, a lot of that's down to Bertie Auld.
Oh, massively. I'm going to make a few observations about this picture. Firstly, what I would say is, look at that crowd, Des. Look at the crowd. It's a sensational sea of heads. There's no gaps in that crowd whatsoever. And bear in mind, you used to get the attendance, and it was 80,000, over 100,000, and that's not counting the kids that were getting lifted over the turnstiles. Des. That is sensational.
That was 108,800 people rammed in there like sardines. Bertie, explains that. But in the play, which is coming to the Pavilion in February, go and see Bendel and Bertie at the Pavilion. It's brilliant. You'll love it. Don't know where that came from. But Jim's right. People think Big Jock was a catalyst when he came back. No. Bertie was like Roy the Rovers, a real life Roy the Rovers, all the way through that run, right through that final. That was the biggest corner that Celtic turned, and basically instrumental in the big influence on what was to happen next. What would Celtic have done without Bertie, that whole cup run? I don't know.
Jim said earlier that it was the first trophy they had won in years. It was actually the first trophy, Jim, they had won since the 1957 League Cup final that Bertie was left out of for nearly mocking. It was a 7-1 game. That was the last trophy Celtic had won. And here's a wee bit of trivia, because I know Jim loves a bit of trivia. If you rewatch the game, right, and Charlie Gallagher flights over the corner and Big Billy rises and scores that headed goal to make it 3-2. The next person that touches that ball is the ball boy, right? And the ball boy runs to the back of the net and kicks it to the Dunfermline player. That ball boy is Andy Lynch, who scored a penalty kick into that goal 12 years later for Celtic against Rangers in the 1977 Scottish Cup final. How tremendous is that, eh?
Did somebody write a book about Andy Lynch? Paul John Dykes, is that the guy? I can't remember. I don't know.
I'm going to go back to Des for a moment, because he looks very festive just now because of the backdrop, the environment that he's in with the snow. It looks very Christmassy. It's fantastic.
It's the most wonderful time.
You've done that. You've done that.
We did chestnuts roasting. This is.
Did you? Oh, it's okay.
It's part Bertie and part Bublé today.
I'm just glad you didn't slip there, Des. That would have been a horrific turn of events.
I'm actually getting my charger. This is how much on the hoof we are today, flying by the seat of our pants. I'm getting my charger.
It's working though. It definitely is working, and it takes us on to a moment in time. And I'm going to come to yourself first. Look at the incredible outpouring of emotion here, Jim, in that one image. You've got even the Inter Milan players, the shoulders are all down. You know, I've looked at this game and I've said it was almost like dark versus light. You had the blue and the black of the Inter Milan kits against the resplendent green and white hoops. And you know, it was dark v light, good versus evil, all that kind of stuff. That's us winning Europeans' biggest prize. What a phenomenal picture that is, Bertie.
Dark versus light. You should be a writer. Can do that kind of stuff. I think we tend to take technology for granted a little bit. You know, we live in an age now where everyone's got mobile phones and their video and things and stuff like that. Somebody captured that photograph. Imagine capturing that photograph and all the stuff you just said there, Paul. All that's in that one photograph, the emotions, good and bad, and just hands in the air, and an incredible moment, and it's something that people still celebrate, you know, all these years later. And to have captured that is phenomenal. Phenomenal. I mean, again, you could talk about Lisbon all day, but that's why I picked that picture, because there was loads of pictures you picked about Lisbon that featured Bertie in them, but that one to me is just the final whistles went at that point in time. They've realised they won the thing.
I mean, I think the player you can see just over the shoulder of number 5, I think is Sandro Mazzola, and he's actually looking to the ground, isn't he? It is him, I think, and he's looking to the ground, so despondent. And look at the spring in Billy McNeil's step there, Jim. Billy McNeil in between Stevie and Bertie, the spring in his step. And this is the game that changed everything. You were talking about Celtic being just another Scottish club at that time. Yeah, they had proud traditions and histories, but at that time so did Hibs. You know, both clubs, you know, the formation of both clubs were for similar reasons in different cities in Scotland. And, you know, this is what put us on the map, and it's Lisbon, and it's 67, and it's a rite of passage for any Celtic fan to recite the names from Simpson right through to number 11. Bobby Lennox, and there he is, Bertie Auld. But one of the most famous tales about that day involving Bertie was the singing in the tunnel, and it's become part of Celtic folklore, hasn't it?
Is Des ready? You ready, Mr. McLean?
He's getting his...
We were standing there in the tunnel at Lisbon. I can still remember that as if it was yesterday. I'm standing looking across at the Inter Milan players, Sandro Mazzola. They looked like film stars, a whole lot of them. Wee Jinky said that. He says, Bertie, they look like film stars. Look at them. And I says, I know, Jinky, but can they play? And they did look like film stars. Sandro Mazzola, the Inter Milan team. Oh, they had the suntan. They had the gelled hair. And they had the white teeth. Oh, your teeth on Ronnie Simpson's bonnet. Anyway, that goes on and on and on. As you know, it's absolute poetry. That is something that's going to go down as like a Celtic version of Shakespeare. Just Bertie's, Bertie's words in the tunnel in Lisbon. There's an extended version that you can see in Bendel at Bertie at the Pavilion Theatre this coming February, which would make the ideal stop filler for any Celtic fan. So there's an extended version of that, and you know, where I deliver it with more gusto and probably slightly more industrial language too. So that whole for Bertie, not only to have, you know, we're talking about what a player he was, what an influence, what a motivator. For him to go out and start singing that in the tunnel, you know, it's like that's what you call Gallus. That moment, that's Gallus personified, isn't it? That's pure Gallus. For him to do that.
That's a great word to describe Bertie Auld. Didn't he wear the European Cup medal, Jim, round his neck on a chain?
Did he? Didn't I know? It's news to me.
Yeah, I thought it was you that told me that one. I thought it was you that told me that. So, and quite rightly so as well, to have that tiny wee postage stamp medal, the first non-Latin club to win. We know the fairy tale element of Celtic, and that was them becoming champions of European football. I love this poster. And I remember back in '88 when the official Celtic video came out, and as a kid watching the footage of this game against Racing Club, which for everybody who's watching at the moment, this was basically the European champions playing the South American counterparts, and this was to decide who was the best club side in the world, Jim, wasn't it?
The last two pictures of a peak, from a peak to a trough, basically one of the greatest days, one of the worst days. I think that photo is quite funny because Bertie was about 5'6", and that guy's about 8 foot, I think. So they've got him virtually the kind of same height. The games, Celtic beat them 1-0 at Hampden Park at the time, and Racing Club kicked Celtic off the park. Second game, Celtic lost 2-1, kicked them off the park even more, spat and hacked and kicked and punched. Ronnie Simpson got injured before the game started, missile thrown from the crowd. John Fallon took over. So lost the second game 2-1, won the first game 1-0, 2 each in aggregate. Back then there was no away goals. So went to a third game in Uruguay, and at the time Bob Kelly, the chairman, didn't want to go because he feared for the safety of the players. But Jock Stein wanted to go and insisted that they went. And one of the things that Jock Stein always regretted doing, because it turned into one of the kind of worst days in Celtic's history. I think Racing Club took about 30,000 fans across the border from Argentina to Uruguay, hostile atmosphere. 4 Celtic players get sent off, a couple of Racing Club players get sent off, referee didn't know what he was doing. Bertie was one of the 4 that get sent off, but refused to go off the park.
He refused to go. He wouldn't
I'm
even
not
get
going
sent
off.
off.
No, you're not sending me off. Funny thing was that Bertie never played in the second game. He won the first game 1-0 and then lost the second game 2-1. Bertie wasn't playing. I've never found out why he wasn't playing. And so 4 Celtic players sent off, 2 Racing Clubs. Celtic lost 1-0, and that was that. I mean, to get back up the road, the board thought it'd be a good idea to fine all the players £250 for letting the good name of Celtic down. So, it wasn't a particularly good period, good few games in Celtic's history, that one.
No, and again, it's this discipline coming up. Again, Des, we're talking about his Scotland career being affected by it. Apparently, Sir Robert Kelly, or Bob Kelly as he was back then, wanted to get rid of Bertie first time round because of his disciplinary issues, and then obviously he's got the boxing gloves on, almost literally, against Racing Club for this game as well.
He couldn't walk. I mean, he admitted that it was bang, as his dad says, just go in there, first, don't walk away from a tackle, and he made no apology about the fact that Bertie was a wee Gallus game guy. He took no prisoners, always a hard man. The Leeds United team later on, I mean, they were full of hard men, notorious hard men. Your Terry Coopers and your Norman Hunter bites your legs and all that. Nothing against wee Bertie. When it came to, so it was, but the laugh is, I need to tell Jim something that I forgot to tell him about Brendan Liberty. See that photograph there? I'm a pal who came along to see it a couple of times. It's worth going to see twice, by the way, but you can even see it once this coming February in the pavilion. He thought we show these photographs obviously between the scenes and all that, and that one came up, and they went, "Oh, that was a really good Photoshop, with the old boxing gloves." I says, "No, that was the programme." How ironic. How prophetic was it for the they must? How did they know that it was going to be literally a real boxing match?
Also for both people who follow me on Twitter, that's today's Advent calendar. 9 days to Christmas. So there you go.
Oh, Jim.
And the perfect Christmas present would be, Des.
No, sorry.
And the perfect Christmas present would be
Bendit Liberty at the Pavilion Theatre.
Great idea.
That is a phenomenal idea.
You know how the next week is just going to be an absolute frenzy. People are going to be sitting there under pressure. Fuel costs are high. They're sitting chanting, listening to Chris Rea driving home for Christmas, thinking, "I hate this time of year. I don't have time to go to the Silverburn or Braehead or the Forge. But what I can do in this traffic jam is just click on my phone in 2 easy steps. Bendit Liberty, and that's me got a couple of tickets for my brother, my father, my mother, my nephew, whatever. It really is the Celtic play for all the family."
And also get
Absolutely
heat
is.
and get heat in the pavilion. It's nice and warm as well. So there you go.
This picture
really
here,
This picture, sorry.
Jim, when we're talking about this picture, and like you say, it is just round the corner, Christmas, and I think that something like this, to wake up on Christmas morning, it's also something to look forward to when, the Christmas dust has settled and you're back into the drudgery of going to your work 5 or 6 days a week, and then you've got something to look forward to. That's what I always like, having a gig ticket or a theatre ticket. So, yeah, click on the link underneath this video and get your tickets for Bend It Like Bertie. This one here, I think he's looking as though he's getting to that stage of his career, Jim. You could tell me the era where there's a transformation between Bertie the player and Bertie the manager, who comes a wee bit later, where you see Bertie, and I'm not actually sure if any of these images are on the Advent calendar here, but it's Bertie with a big jacket, the hat, and the cigar, and he's kind of morphing into that Bertie, I think, in this picture with his two young kids at this moment in time.
Like that morphing into the new Bertie. Metamorphosis. I've said a few times about the Lisbon Lions. These are ordinary people who've lived this extraordinary life, and I think you never think about them as family people. That the fact that they get wives and kids and what happened and what have you. And imagine Bertie was your dad. How mental would that be? And Robert, who I've now met a few times, Robert's son. I mean, he was Bertie's permanent minder, and obviously Dad was very much in demand everywhere and running about after him. So I just thought to myself, what it must have been like to have Bertie Auld as your dad. Are there any Lisbon Lions, but especially Bertie Auld, and maybe John Hughes, his son, could give us a bit of an insight into that. But I liked that picture because it's just Bertie, the ordinary guy, and he was an ordinary guy at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's a great picture, and at that time again, the young kid Des with the hoops on, and it's a passage down the generations, isn't it? To be introduced, to be born into Celtic, and I know that's become a bit of a cliche, but I can see that in the picture as well, passing on the gift of Celtic to your laddie.
Of course, I mean, and that was back then, and it is. Yes, it is. It's a whole new generation, and when you imagine, when you think about the players get nowadays, ridiculous. The money's just absolutely ridiculous, and when you think of what he achieved at Celtic and, how much of a personality he was and all that, what would Bertie be like now? When you see all these absolute guys who do not deserve it, deadbeats who are on hundreds of thousands a week and all that. Bertie was a personality as well as a brilliant footballer. He would have been a brilliant media guy nowadays and stuff like that. But funnily enough, I've met Robert a few times, and this is a perfect opportunity to tell the brilliant. I know we've been joking and laughing because it's Christmas and stuff like that, but Robert came along, and that was the picture that he came along to Motherwell Concert Hall, and it was a brilliant show. It was probably the first show that was really, really. It was just this is when we really, really caught fire. Motherwell Concert Hall. It was sold out, brilliant atmosphere. Saturday night, all guns blazing. And at the end of it, you kind of go, I think that was a really good one. I enjoyed every show, but I just thought this one, I think every single thing clicked. And then Robert says, can we come down and meet the cast? Of course. And he came down, bang at the door, and he was, you could tell he'd been breaking his heart. And that was the photo, that comes after there's a very emotional part of the show. I won't give it away, Jim. And that photo.
Whoa, you've disappeared.
But after it, and it's hard enough for me. There's a lot, and I thought this must be. He says, "What size are you in a jacket?" And Jim Orr replied,
42 medium.
Me and him are like Morecambe wise, we're like Anton. So he says without hesitation, 42 medium. Right, and I was like, what? I was still sinking in when you've just done a show. It doesn't matter if it's stand up or anything, or your brain's just kind of calming down. It's just. And I was like, why did he ask that? I genuinely was like, it just. And then the next day at lunchtime, I'll never forget, I was standing in the house here, and I got this WhatsApp, and it was a photograph of a Lisbon Lion jacket, blazer. And I thought, and then the wee message at the bottom, it's just processing, my brain's just processing it. And it was from Robert Auld, and Robert said, here's a present from my mum. And it was Bertie's blazer, Bertie's Lisbon Lion blazer, Bertie's iconic Lisbon Lion blazer as a present. And I was like, it didn't know that your brain, you're good. No, hold on, what, And I'm looking at it, and my wife saw she's going, what is it? And I was like, you won't understand. I phoned my ma right away. I went, I've I've got Bertie Auld's Lisbon. Well, it's been given to me as a present, I think. Oh, and I was like, no. And then it sank in. I phoned Jim. I sent him the photo. Jim was like, no way. We got the blazer on the Tuesday. We were off to Oban to do a gig, sunny Oban, a midweek gig. The tour continued, and Robert says, you'll have it in time for that. Robert, a few photographs got took with the newspapers, and Robert put it on to me. It was like Tiger Woods putting the all green blazer on, right, and it fitted me like a glove. I mean, I had all this, right. I've got this seamstress, I've got this tailor ready. It'll either be this, no, fitted me like a glove. You couldn't get a better fit. And then I wore it that night, and I told the story, and it's just incredible. And to get that, you don't get a bigger seal of approval than that. You don't.
Absolutely.
For them to give me his jacket. And then Robert sent me a nice message a couple of weeks later, and he went, when I told him we were going to Vegas, and he says, yes. Robert says, the Vegas returns, the blazer returns to Vegas. And I just thought that was amazing for him to say that. His dad, who loved Vegas, Bertie was Mr. Vegas. And
I've heard many people calling him that, Des. And you'd spent some quality time with Bertie Auld on the way to and in Vegas as well, didn't you?
He was. You know how you jokingly said about Bertie.
Your signal's gone just a wee bit there, Des. We'll move on to the next picture and see if you come back in. If you can come back in. He's silenced for the moment. But we will move on to the next image, Jim. Just while Desi's signal comes back on the phone, and we'll come back to his Vegas. Are you back with us, Des? We'll go back to his Vegas story.
Yes, I haven't.
There we go.
Sorry. I didn't even know I was away. That would have been a highlight for many people watching. But sorry about that.
I was half a know you were away. Sorry.
Right. No.
You were talking about Vegas just before. Yeah.
Right now,
Vegas.
Paul, Jim, how would you feel if you were sitting? You know how you sit on a plane and you go, "What am I going to do? I've read that book. I've read that mag."
There's maybe a wee issue with the Wi-Fi at the minute, Jim. But if that is the case, we'll try and get Des back. It's just a slight issue with the Wi-Fi, a wee bit technical at the moment. However, Jim, I'm going to ask you this. We'll come back to Des in that story because I'm looking forward to it. This image, Bertie, this is the Leeds United game, isn't it? After we've knocked Leeds United out of the European Cup in the semi-final. And I often wonder when I look at this, whatever happened to that hat? You know, that's the kind of thing that should be sitting in a glass case at Celtic Park, Bertie's hat. What does this picture say to you?
Des said the word Gallus earlier. There's your Gallus photograph of Bertie Auld. And to have a statue of Bertie Auld at Parkhead, that's your statue. Interesting thing, you said the hat. I always wondered whose shirt it was. And where did that end up in terms of, and maybe his son Robert would maybe solving that mystery. But he's obviously got a Leeds player's shirt in his hands. So I just wondered who that shirt. Well, Hampden, 136,000 people plus, biggest crowd of a European match ever. Chances are that'll never be beaten. Lost the first game 1-0 at Leeds. Billy Bremer equalises. Second leg on aggregate. And it's Bertie's cross for Big Yogi to equalise, and then Bobby Mulder scores the winner. And then disappointment of Milan that comes after that. But yeah, in terms of games in Scotland featuring Celtic, that has to be up there. If not the best, it must be pretty close to being the best. And it was shifted to Hampden because they knew it was going to, be very, very a very popular game for people to go and see. So yeah, and again, unless you're a football player, you've got no idea what that must feel like. To have that many people watching you, the Battle of Britain. Leeds were a fantastic team at the time. Nobody was going to beat Leeds, and Celtic beat them home and away. And that's just raw emotion at the end of the game. It's almost like I've got his shirt. I've just ripped his shirt off. This is my prize here. And he's got the ball in his hand again. And similar to Jimmy Johnson when he played against Real Madrid at the Bernabeu when Jimmy Johnson puts the ball above his head. Bertie's got the ball and he's got their shirt. And he's got a hat to go with it as well. So yeah, it's again, you take the technology for granted. Somebody captured that picture. What a brilliant image.
It's a tremendous image, you're right. And I do think back to the Jinky one with the world in his hands, as you described it as previously, Jim. Des, you are back, and I don't want to cut you off from your Vegas story. Let's go, third time lucky. Go for it.
Are we talking about this or Vegas?
Vegas. We'll go Vegas first, and then we'll come back to this picture.
That photograph there is, before we move on, that should be the statue. That should be the statue, the statue of Gallusness outside Celtic. If you want to go along and that's the most, to me, that is just one of the most iconic photographs of any Celtic player ever. It's incredible. The Vegas, I'm sitting on the plane, and for 10 hours, 10, 11 hours, Bertie Auld is regaling me with all these stories, and he's sitting going, this was a big joke, at that time, wee Jinky was barred for this pub in Wishaw, and I'm telling him, you can't get down there. So then I'm sitting there, right, and wee Jinky says, well, I'm meeting up with, and I'm sitting hearing all this. Paul, could you imagine hearing all this stuff? Right?
Oh.
Story after story after story, stuff that had never been printed, stuff that had never been told to anybody. And he's telling me, and here's another thing, right? We went out, right, and Big TG, Big Graham, he was pissed that night, so and I'm just sitting there going, this is incredible. This is incredible. And this was another night. Now, here's the thing, right? So and he's telling me all this stuff, and I'm just sitting here going, wow. And the fact that obviously I'm playing him. And by the way, Bertie, I swear to God, when I was doing my turn in Vegas and I was doing all the voices and all the impersonations, Bertie was the first guy to come up to me, and he loved all the impersonations. He loved all the Billy Connolly and the Stallone and Sean Connery and all that. That was a bit. He loved all that, And he just loved the entertainment side. And like you can tell it, as I said earlier on, Billy Connolly said he would have been a stand-up comedian. And when you saw him in Baird's Bar and all that, it was as funny as anybody. He's standing there with a mic and slagging everybody off, and people walking in, dealing with hecklers, the timing, big laughs. Not an easy crowd, Baird's Bar, just, and you can see all the players all walking in. Even the real partner mates, it's like wee Jinky and that, were all sitting back going, oh, hold on a minute, Bertie's the man, he's holding court here. But no, to be over in Vegas and to sit, and Bertie sitting telling you all these stories like only Bertie can, it genuinely felt like half an hour, a 10-hour flight, 11-hour flight. I couldn't get enough of it. And by the way, I can talk, right? Jim Orr can talk. Nothing like Bertie. Bertie just, and I was just sitting going, right? And he's, amazing.
I was going to ask you, Des, how useful was that when it came round to that moment where Jim Orr pitched Bender like Bertie? You must have just gone back in time and thought the characterisation was already there.
Absolutely. Well, you and I were sitting here. You and I were here the very, very early days of lockdown. Remember that, the March, April, and Jim said, Paul John does a podcast. It was only a podcast then, audio style. A lot of listeners, because me and you were on it, and my mates were working abroad, and they messaged me to say, we heard you on a Celtic State of Mind. It wasn't the all singing, all dancing, beautiful big studio you've got now. And then I was telling you about it, and I was doing Bertie and stuff like that. But I still remember when Bertie was talking to me, the fact, how you mentioned that photograph earlier on back in 1957, and he's got his hands on the older guy, the way that's what Bertie was like, the wee arm round you, tactile, the wee nods, the wee, all right, son, how are you getting on? You all right? The arm round you, always like that. And yes, when he was talking about it, he's sitting, listen, son, see, you talk about your messes and all that now, you're that, all this nonsense. Wee Jinky could walk the ball into the net. He was better than all. And he was going on about every player, and honestly, see Bobby Murdoch, I promise you, son, I promise. And he's giving me his review and his thing of every single player. And you know something? There was a boy, Stevie Murray. And it was just, this was hearing everything for Bertie Auld. This money could not buy that. That was just like as good as the holiday itself. It's 10, 11 hours Bertie Auld storytelling, funny gags.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Bertie telling you what he thought of all the players and all that. You just couldn't. You couldn't. So when Jim suggested this, and obviously here's the book here, and you're reading it, and even when you're reading, and it's just like it is. Even when you're reading it, it's Bertie. You're seeing Bertie. You're seeing Bertie talking to you. Everything. I promise you, son. Honestly, it was magnificent.
here's the thing, right? Big Jock would always say, you have the ability to entertain. If you could entertain. Every syllable is a prisoner with Bertie. Every syllable a prisoner. And I love that. I love that, you know, like Billy Connolly. Aye, I've never, you know, and Bertie was the same. It was just the passion when he was just talking about anything. The passion was brilliant. From the soft hat, you know, of Charlie Tully to his attention to detail was amazing. And that's why I loved sitting listening to him. What an honour that was. What a pleasure, what a privilege. So that's one of these ones where you go, oh, I've won a competition. Sitting with a Lisbon Lion. A real, you know, and let's be honest, he was the one guy that had the personality in this. We keep saying it, the Gallusness, the funny guy, you know, out of them all. So to have all that, it was amazing, yeah. And then look what happened. You know, we end up playing him and then you know getting his blazer and stuff like that. I'll bring out the blazer before the end of the show, yeah, to show you all.
No, definitely Des. Talking about that attention.
Got called early for this one. That's why it's not ready, and why I'm on the phone.
The attention to detail. I remember having the absolute pleasure and privilege of speaking to Bertie once, Jim, and he was telling me about Neely because he looked up to Neely. Neely was a wee bit older than him, and he said he couldn't get angry with Neely Mockin for taking his place in the 1957 League Cup final. But he spoke about how Neely would look after him when he was a young player coming through, and he took him into the bookies because Neely Mockin loved a punt. And Bertie was quite naive to all this kind of stuff. And Neely asked him to pick a horse, and he said, when I looked up, I seen the name Kirriemuir. He goes, and it reminded me of the gingerbread that my mum used to sell in the newsagent or something like that, right? So they put all this money on this horse and it won. And I'm sitting talking to Bertie and I'm thinking, let's talk about the European Cup final. No, let's talk about a horse called the Kirriemuir and why you put all your money on it. It was just brilliant because he was such a storyteller that I was engrossed in it. It didn't matter if he wasn't, you know, talking about the European Cup final. And you had the pleasure, of course, as well, Jim, of actually meeting him. I've heard Desi's tales there on the flight. What was your memories of meeting the great Bertie Auld?
We met Bertie a couple of years ago. I think he'd been recently diagnosed with dementia, but he was still on top for him. I'd never met him before. Des had met him a number of times. He was a big fan of Des. He'd seen Des live. Actually, he worked with Des as well on a few charity things as well.
Yep.
And so Des, we're basically going to put this play on. I never met Bertie, and I thought it'd be a good idea to, if we could meet him, just to kind of reassure him that you're going to see something called Bend Like Bertie kicking about, hopefully in the city, and don't be worried that this is what it's all about, sort of thing. So Des managed to organise a meeting. I think it was August 2020 in Bertie's golf club. We go to Bertie's golf club. And he sort of greets you like a long lost friend. Jim, how are you doing? It's great to meet you, and I've been looking forward to meet you. You're thinking, why would Bertie Auld look forward to meet me? You've written a play, son. I've written a play. And because it was my play, I did most of the speaking for the next like 45 minutes or so. And I brought all this memorabilia from 65. And then after about 45 minutes, Des had to go make a phone call, and Robert, his son, had to go away. And it was just me and Bertie for the next 10, 15 minutes. And I mean, Des got 10 hours of Bertie. That 10, 15 minutes was brilliant. And he was dead interested because I was telling him about Football Memories, which is an Alzheimer's Scotland thing that I'm involved with, and he was dead interested. And Football Memories is all about trying to spark memories from people who are football fans by showing them photographs of older players. And I brought some of the cards with me, and the first one I showed him was Bertie himself. And as you would expect, he's going to say, "Oh, handsome man, that boy there, who's he?" And I'd show them all his other players, and he would rhyme them off in terms of who they were, sort of thing. So that was the highlight of my year, to spend 10, 15 minutes with Bertie Auld. And the really sad thing, is you never got a chance to see the play. That was, amongst all the other sad things that we were there talking. Because Des is so good at playing him, and he'd have loved it. He'd have absolutely loved it. And obviously, his son seen the play and was reduced to tears, and he just said that Des had nailed his dad's voice and his mannerisms and everything about it. So I was fortunate to spend 15, 20 minutes in the company of the great man. So that was a highlight for me.
What a seal of approval that is. And by the way, there's a thing that's coming to my mind here, Jim. about this particular picture because it's a profile of Bertie. It's this underbite that anybody doing an impression of Bertie would need to obviously undertake that mannerism as well. You know what this reminds me of? Remember the brilliant cartoons you used to get in the paper by Malky McCormick? Remember?
It's funny you should say that, because when I look at this picture, I think, you and Game on Wallace, that looks like a picture, but Bertie, that looks like a painting.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't look like a photograph. And the other thing about this picture, obviously, that's his last game ever for Celtic, and unlike a lot of other players, he knew it was his last game. So that must have been a really emotional day for him.
Oh,
Paul,
absolutely.
how Lisbon Lions played that day?
How many?
Yeah.
Now, let me just.
One for the online chat. There you
go. I'm not going to check on
online?
Wikipedia. I'm not going to check on Wikipedia.
Fact.
So I'm looking at Willie Wallace, and I knew obviously that he left on the same day as John Hughes. So if he's there, who else would have been there? Most of them would have still been at the club. I'm going to go for 10 days. That's a stab in the dark. I'm going to say 10.
Jim, we're going to give him that, aren't we? That well done. Although we were throwing it out there to the
online community. 10.
Oh, brilliant! And was the goalkeeper the only one that was? Did Simpson not play that day? Was it?
I think he came out and had a wee kick about and went away again.
Yeah, absolutely. And bizarrely enough, I'm going to say it was 1971. Would I be right in saying that?
May 1971, yes.
Oh, yeah. Superb. But he's on the shoulders there of his teammates, Tommy Gemmell, big smile. But you're right, there's almost a caricature quality to that image of Bertie. And although he's smiling there, Jim, I'm pretty sure that inside there's a lot of raw emotion that's his final game for Celtic.
Because you mentioned his hair doesn't look right. It's like an off painting. It's like just not a perfect painting. Anyway, I digress.
I know. It's interesting when I look at all these pictures, I'm just looking at hairstyles and what they're wearing and all this kind of stuff. And there's the Bertie that many of the younger generation will remember if you've ever had the pleasure of meeting him. And I think it's probably a good time to go back to Des once he comes back into the show.
That's a nice jacket Bertie's wearing.
That's
a nice
blazer. Oh, look at that picture there.
Look,
there it is.
I don't know if you can see this brilliant photograph, right? Now, this was taken by, this was taken by Jim Orr. Look at that. Look at that. I'm standing there, the great man right behind me in the shadow. Can you see it?
Brilliant. And you took that, Jim?
That's better.
That was
Jim
me,
took that. And you know what? You could get 10 cameramen every single night for the next 10 nights, and they wouldn't have caught. It was just perfect. Look at that.
That is brilliant, Jim. And that's the blazer.
That's the blazer.
That's me wearing the blazer, and Bertie's got the blazer. And as soon as I put that up on Facebook, his granddaughter just went, "Wow, oh my, OMG," and so it was obviously struck a wee emotional note, so unbelievable. I'm trying to get a good, yeah. I mean, look at that, right behind. It was on this. Bertie was on the screen, and I was just standing there, and it's just a brilliant photograph.
It is. It's superb, Jim. Well done. Great shot. And
Jim
obviously
Orr,
that takes
many talents.
a man of numerous talents. Des. That takes us on to the that blazer, the Lisbon Lions blazer. What a gift from the family to Des. The real deal. Part of the history and the fabric, of course, at the Celtic Football Club. And Des was gifted that by the family, and that is a seal of approval. They are happy with your depiction of the great man, Des, and that must fill you with a sincere amount of pride,
Couldn't believe it. I mean, honestly, it's one of these ones. I wish I could. I'm trying to go back to that moment where Robert just quite the thing. Here's a wee present for you. A wee present, Bertie's blazer from my mum. So he's went home, told his mum there's a great show, and then to get that, that's it was the ultimate seal of approval. We love what you're doing. We're behind this. This is great. It made Robert cry. I know he wouldn't thank me for it. He was breaking his heart. But then for them to say, wear that, carry the legend on. And then it wasn't just the fact we weren't on the tour. The tour was brilliant. To go to Aberdeen and Inverness and Dundee and Oban and Falkirk and all these places, it was just great. All different rooms. There was something great about every single show. They all had their funny moments and their different wee demographics and all that. But when you started wearing the blazer, it genuinely felt as if you were a superhero. You were pulling on, and it was Tony who said, "Des, that must be the next." Tony Haggerty said, "Des, that must be the next best thing to pulling on the hoops and running on the park." And I thought, it is. That to me is like, we all dream of playing for Celtic and scoring a goal, right? For Celtic, we all dream about it. That's what we. But to pull on the blazer, that's the next best thing. It's just to pull on the great man's blazer and to wear it and to be up there, being Bertie and bending like Bertie is just phenomenal. And then when his family come along, that is when hold on, I really need to do the man proud. I need to respect the man, even though he was up for a laugh and all that. But still, it's Bertie. This is his family, and when they came along, and you know what, Jim, Robert hasn't seen me with the blazer on the show yet, has he?
No.
No, so he came along to the show, Motherwell Concert Hall, and then he went, "There's the blazer." So when he comes along to the pavilion, we'll make sure of that. He'll see the blazer. It's a real deal now, and I'll also tell the story, which is a very nice, genuine story from the heart about how we got the blazer and stuff like that. So that you cannot get any better. As I say, that I didn't. Not for a minute did I dream that when we're doing the tour and stuff like that, the family would go. Robert would say, "Right, there you go, present from my mum." Bertie's white, and that's it. That's what made it. That's what made it. And also a close second is the brilliant photograph that's now framed that I just showed you of me with Bertie in the backdrop on the screen and me standing there. Amazing. So there you go, Jim. You're a close second.
Well captured, Jim. Well captured.
Here's a quick quiz question. Can you put the photograph back up?
Yes.
Certainly can. That one.
On his lapel is an H. What does the H stand for? Oh, leave it to online chat people.
Right, just ask online. Keep this one for them.
The H on his lapel, he's got an H.
You can see it quite clearly there, yeah. Interesting. Jim, I love your trivia, and I love this picture, in actual fact. And he's in a box. I'm not sure whose box it is, but he's certainly enjoying a Celtic victory. Would it be a victory over Rangers, Jim Orr?
I thought that was a cup final in one of the trebles. I thought, maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, it's such a great picture. I mean, he's either 80 or about to become 80, and there he is. Doesn't he care? I think we've just won the cup. I think that's what that is, and that's his son Robert, who's standing beside him. I'm not sure who's been. Bertie had a very close group of friends, and what they've done subsequent to his death is that they formed something called the BERTIE AULD Legacy to help disadvantaged people, and 25% of the profits of Ben like Bertie will be going to that, and 25% is going to football memories. And next time you show me on the screen, I'm actually wearing the BERTIE AULD Legacy T-shirt. So so that's there, that one. So that's BERTIE AULD Legacy T-shirt. And that's there's a BERTIE AULD Legacy thing down there somewhere. Not very good with this video stuff. Anyway, so anyway, what was the point? Photograph, yeah. I mean, it just shows Bertie. I mean, that's BERTIE AULD, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. And I think that, Des, when you look at that, on you go.
Carry on.
When you're looking at a picture like that, obviously, as someone who is acting, who's trying to get the voice right, there's also a big part of the mannerisms as well. And when you look at that Bertie, the one who is all singing, all dancing, and you're able to replicate that on the stage, how difficult is it? Or is it quite natural to you to do that, having spent so long with them?
You just grow into him, and because I was telling, see now you've got the blazer, it genuinely feels as if you are Iron Man or something. You feel as if you're wearing this blazer and you just become Bertie up there, and just everything, the whole vibe of the show and everything, the 60s music and everything. It's just you just become Bertie up there. Everything about every mannerism, every little quirky, every little thing, yeah. And that was such a when when I first met Jim and we were doing the podcast and stuff like that, and it was just basically a rough, it was just a loose idea in the pipeline. He didn't really know, and then for it to come to this Pavilion Theatre, getting the blazer, going to Vegas, having done a tour this year, sell out shows, it just shows you, dreams can come true. And
you're going to Vegas, Des? You're going to Vegas? What's this about Vegas?
Vegas next year.
Are we? Good. What's this?
So we're off to Vegas.
Setting up for you.
Right, we're going to Vegas. We're going to the Westgate Theatre, which is the very same theatre that Elvis Presley holds the record for 8 years, the longest ever run in Vegas. Yes, and Barry Manilow's playing there just now. Not quite the same. Can you imagine that? Bermuda tricolour makes people disappear. Right, so but about Barry, we need to. Jim's had loads of Murdo McLeod and. When I think of Jackie McNamara, like when you go through the John Fallon, loads of Celtic players, ex-Celtic players holding up the old poster, right? But we need to get Barry Manilow holding up the Bender like Bertie. Go see Bender like Birdie in Vegas. Hey, you want it. You just, and there's the great man himself holding the poster. So
that's from August 2020 when he wasn't well, but he looks $1 million there. Mm-hmm. And there's another picture of him and Des, which is not on the advent calendar. But, brilliant picture. Love that picture because that's my play, that is, and that's BERTIE AULD, that is.
Proud time for you, Jim. I mean, I think that it is. It really is, and he's a guy that people go on about greatest of ourselves, greatest players, greatest entertainers. Is there a better personality, Jim, in the history of Celtic Football Club than this man right here?
You can only talk about what you know yourself, and I think football has changed dramatically in the last 30, 40 years. You don't get people like BERTIE AULD, you don't get players like Lisbon Lions. I don't mean like the Lisbon Lions. I mean the players who played up until maybe the mid-80s are a different breed of the people you get now. So you can't really compare them both. But I think back in the day, the players drank in the same pubs as the fans and shopped in the same shops. They're not multi-millionaires as they are now. So you could make a case, as I said earlier, for Bertie being the greatest ever Celtic player. You certainly could make a case. Not just on the field, like a whole combination of things. And after post Lisbon Lions, he was going to go to Celt, I think, and I think that's why I mentioned earlier that if you're BERTIE AULD's son, then you're virtually a full-time minder because your dad's in such demand. And as the song goes, everyone loves Bertie.
Oh, fantastic. I'm going to leave you with the final word, Des. You will be on the stage playing this icon of Celtic's history. Give us one last blast of promotion for this in February. How can we get tickets? Obviously, the link is underneath. Tell us why we should be buying tickets for this play. At that moment, Des, I think your phone went. There was a wee delay.
Speechless.
Am I off? I'm still here. Right. Somebody put a lovely. There's been so many tributes to this. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? I'm here. Yeah. Right. Somebody put a brilliant tribute and they said this has brought joy to Bertie's family, and that was the nicest thing that anybody said. And I thought, what if that? It was just. The fact that Bertie came up to me and went, do you know what? I love the impersonation, son. I love when you do this. I love when you do that. And I thought, for me to be doing him now, Bertie would have loved this. But it's just been, honestly, the best thing. If you love Celtic, if you love going to the theatre, if you love nostalgia, if you love the 60s music, if you love to sit there with your mum, dad, grandpa, it's the best moment. I remember talking to a grandpa until his wee grandson. The grandson was about 19, 20, and the grandpa was late 70s. Both of them loved to play, and that's it for me. Right across the board, generations loving the play, And that's it. And it's just been the greatest fun. Amazing.
You know,
Wonderful
it's been
play.
a great journey. It's been a great journey, Des, for you coming on all those years ago, like you say, and Jim being a part of Acsom for so long, to see this come into fruition, you know, from an idea, from a blank canvas to, you know, making it bigger and taking it on the road as you did. I'm really looking forward to it. You guys are a massive support for A Celtic State of Mind, and we are hoping to support charity this Christmas. That's why we have been here for the last hour or so. Thanks everybody for getting involved. Click on the links underneath this video for tickets to go and see Bend It Like Bertie. Download our charity single, The Glory and the Dream, and donate to the birthplace of Celtic, St Mary's. All that's left for me to say is Jim Orr and Des McLean, aka Bertie Auld. Thank you for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Can I just say good luck with the charity
Thank you,
weekend,
and
Paul?
Merry Christmas, everyone.